This is such a nightmare. I mean, Klay Thompson, one of the toughest players in the league. You know, you grew up with a daddy who played in the league, was a former number 1 overall pick in Michael Thompson, a 2-time, 20-12 guy in Portland, a 2-time NBA champion, backing up Kareem on the Lakers. So you think he grows up with a silver spoon, right? Like, how tough a player is he going to be? Tough as nails. That dude ripped up his leg and didn't want to come out of a finals game. And I agree, had Klay stayed in that game, maybe they beat Toronto even without KD. I thought that the Raptors would win, but I have to admit, when Klay gets hot, and he was hot, it's impossible. Do you understand Klay Thompson was capable of getting hotter than any player in the history of basketball? If someone said, who's the player who, like they called Vinny the Microwave Johnson, right, because it could heat up off the bench right away. But if you said, which player could get hotter than any player who ever lived, the answer is Klay Thompson. Just objectively. You understand, Klay had the fewest dribbles per point ever by a lot, right? Klay Thompson once scored 26 points in a quarter, and it was his second highest total in a quarter that season. Imagine that. You scored 26, not in a game, in a quarter, not in a half, in a quarter. And it's not even your best scoring quarter of the season because he scored 37 in another quarter that year, which is, of course, the all-time record. He could shoot. Listen, Klay could get to spots that a 3-and-D guy usually isn't able to get to. He was a 3-and-D plus in the sense that he could also handle and he could pass. It's not what you wanted him doing, but he could do it. And he could shoot the lights out and really defend at 6'7". What a tragedy in Achilles. Very difficult to come back from. He was already coming back from a catastrophic injury. That's everyone just thought, oh, yeah, an ACL, you'll get back. Not necessarily. What Klay had, a lot of people never are the same from. But everyone was thinking, at least it's not an Achilles. Because even I was here cautioning everyone, hey, it's not an Achilles, but it's no walk in the park. He maybe comes back, maybe doesn't from this as the same guy. But it is true, at least it's not an Achilles, and now it's also an Achilles. Oh, I'm rooting for Klay, unlike I've rooted for many athletes in the past. I'm rooting for this guy so hard. And, Michael Thompson, being a colleague at ESPN and a guy I've done radio with many times, because it's his son, I've been watching Klay since Klay was, a kid, since he's in college. Oof, this is tough. And for the Warriors, I got to tell you, the number 2 pick, you go Wiseman. If you have this news already, think about this. I was debating this with Kendrick Perkins and Stephen A. Smith on the air today. I understand that Steve Kerr and the Warriors don't always have to be the same kind of team. They don't have to be the hot shooting team, right? The 3-point shooting team. I understand that. You don't have to be that. You can win with great athletes and scorers and defenders and all that stuff. And I'm sure Kerr can coach that up. I have no doubt he can. But isn't there a requisite amount of shooting you need in the NBA nowadays? Don't you need some shooting? Steph Curry's the greatest shooter of all time. Considering his handles, he's a mobile artillery unit. He's Steve Nash plus. He's Steve Nash 2.0 because, Steve Nash never picked up the dribble. Steph got better handles, and he doesn't dribble that much, right? And he's a better shooter from a longer distance. But who else shoots on that team now? I don't mean really think about it. You went from a situation with the greatest shooting backcourt ever, right? Steph and Klay. And because of the space that they create, not all 3-point shots are created equal. If you shoot from 5, 10 feet behind the arc, that's tougher for defenses to recover from, to rotate. And so you have guys like Draymond Green shooting wide open threes because the defense is late getting over. Well, the best Draymond Green shot was 38%, and that was in the so-called death lineup. When you could play Draymond, it wasn't about small ball. It was about 5 guys who could shoot and play with skills of smaller players. If you could play small ball, so-called small ball, with 7-footers, you'd rather do that, right? But usually it's harder to find those kind of skills in taller players. So Draymond allowed them to play 5 out. No one's in the paint. All 5 are spread out. because he could knock down threes, but that hasn't been the case in recent years. In his best seasons, with Klay and Steph shooting from a million miles away, Draymond shot 38%. Otherwise, he's a subpar three-point shooter. Subpar. Now, he's Steph's pick-and-roll partner, and that's really important. If you really want to talk about what the Warriors are about, as much as I love Klay, it's really Steph and Draymond, because Draymond's the pick-and-roll partner who can defend and do all those things. But his three-point shot's been off to the point where it's not really the same kind of team it used to be, and that's with Steph and Klay. And there's no Kevin Durant, but what do they have now? They got Steph, the greatest shooter ever. Then they got Wiggins, a subpar shooter. Who else is going to get real minutes? Wiseman is not a shooter. Who else? Pascal is not a shooter. Who else they got? Draymond is not a shooter. Stop me when you hear a guy getting real minutes who can shoot the ball at all. Wiggins is passable, but he's not a good shooter. He shoots below league average from three, and he's your second best shooter in the starting five? Your second best shooter in the starting five is below league average, and the three other guys can't shoot? That's bad news. Yeah, I mean, I understand you don't have to win the way they used to, but you got to be able to shoot. That's requisite shooting, right? If Wiseman is DeAndre Jordan plus, which is what you're hoping, right? And I think there's a good chance he can be. That's a nice player. But really, that's a guy you're hoping can eventually replace Draymond Green as a bigger version of that kind of guy, and hopefully he can develop a shot. Right now, there's a little redundancy there with Wiseman and Draymond. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.